Hello, everyone, and thanks for sitting in tonight. This is James Meschino. We have a small group tonight, but I'm looking forward to presenting this material to you keeners out there. So hopefully you'll enjoy this. This is a webinar that I've taught a number of times in the last year or so because it's very timely. It's nutrition and lifestyle medicine in immunity, how to optimize your immune system and protect your health, because right now it's quite critical that you know how to keep your immune system strong for obvious reasons. But this has always been the case, that your immune system really is, especially as you get older, is really at the heart of defending yourself against a number of virulent infections and also cancer as well. So in a really timely fashion that no one could have predicted, but just before the pandemic hit, in the journal called Frontiers of Immunology, there was a paper published that basically said, we know that nutritional deficiency and inadequacy can impair immune system function. And growing evidence suggests that for certain nutrients, increased intake above the current recommended levels. So the recommended levels that government said and health and the National Research Council sets, that those recommendations are actually too low to optimize immune system function throughout your lifetime, meaning that the amount of vitamin C and vitamin E and selenium and vitamin D that you need to prevent deficiencies of vitamin C and E and selenium and D, levels to just prevent deficiency is not enough to actually optimize immune system function. And so that's interesting that research would come forward right now, because right now is when, that we're being challenged by the pandemic. So having optimal immunity is very important. So some of you are going to have questions throughout this next hour, and you can type your questions into the chat box, and at the end of the session I will look and answer them for you. But if you just hang on, I think you'll see that probably a lot of the questions you want to ask are going to be answered along the way. But at the end, I will look in the chat box to see what questions you wrote, and I'll be happy to address them. So let's move on this. What I'm saying to you at the outset is that the recommended daily allowances for vitamin C and E and selenium and D especially are too low to actually optimize your immune system function. I'm going to show you how that research plays out. In fact, just this year, the National Institutes of Health in the United States on February the 3rd published a statement paper for doctors and healthcare providers called The Review of Supplements and Nutraceuticals in COVID-19 Prevention and Treatment. Now, this is what you don't see on television for some reason, but this was a paper from the NIH. And what they said was, optimal nutritional status can prime an individual's immune system to protect against the effects of acute respiratory viral infections by supporting normal maintenance of the immune system. Nutritional strategies can also play a role in the treatment of hospitalized patients, as malnutrition is a risk for COVID-19 patients. And a lot of patients with COVID-19 severe infection actually have deficiencies or marginal deficiencies. Overall, supplementation of vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc may be an effective method of ensuring their adequate intake to maintain optimal immune function, which may also convey beneficial effects against viral infections due to their immunomodulatory effects. So these nutrients actually allow the immune cells in your body to function with better efficiency, as you're going to see. They went on to say that some of the main risk factors for severe COVID-19, which also happen to be linked to poor nutritional status, include obesity, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and indeed age-related malnutrition. You've seen this before, that these particular subgroups of people are at greater risk for severe infection. But piled on top of that is usually poor nutritional status to begin with. Individuals should pay attention to their nutritional status, particularly their intake of vitamin D, which you probably know, considering that vitamin D deficiency is widespread. 2/3 of people in North America have vitamin D well below what is optimal. The prevailing evidence seems to indicate an association between vitamin D deficiency and COVID-19 incidence and potentially severity. The lower your vitamin D, if you get COVID-19, the more severe the problem is going to be. As a result, some international authorities have advised the general public, particularly those at high risk of infection, to consider vitamin D supplementation. I'm going to show you exactly where the sweet spot is for vitamin D, exactly what your blood level of vitamin D to have optimal protection against all kinds of infections, not just the coronavirus. So what is the function of the immune system? What is it supposed to be doing? Well, we know that the body's immune system helps to protect us against infection. It also clears damaged tissue. So after there's been injury or trauma or infection, it helps to clear out the old destroyed tissue while the body's building new tissue. And it also is has a surveillance system looking for any cancer cells that are emerging, because immune cells can kill cancer cells before they get any real traction. So in a real sense, the development of cancer is a failure of the immune system to perform the task that it's really designed to do. And as you get older, you'll see that your immune system becomes more compromised. Cancer can develop more easily. If your immune system is already compromised from suboptimal nutritional status, the risk is going to be greater. And I'll show you how to mitigate that risk as best we know how to do at this point. The immune system also has to have appropriate tolerance. That means the immune system has to be smart enough to know the difference between your body's normal cells and a cancer cell or a dangerous virus or bacteria, as opposed to the immune cells attacking the body's own normal tissue. That's what happens in an autoimmune disease. So nutritional status also plays into maintaining the immune system function in a way that helps to prevent it from developing an intolerance even to the body's own tissues. Now, we don't know everything about autoimmune diseases because they're triggered by all kinds of different things, from genetics to different antigens and exposures. But you certainly want throughout your lifetime an immune system that is working in the most balanced, intelligent way possible. So the things that are determining how well your immune system is working right now, we know are your genetic inheritance, that's a factor. Environmental exposures, your day-to-day lifestyle, and we'll look at some of those factors, and nutrition. All these four things interact to determine how competent your immune system is going to be. So let's understand when I say the immune system, what am I talking about? I'm saying that in your bone marrow, there's one common stem cell that gives rise to all the blood cells that are in your blood. So one pathway leads down to your platelets, which sort of are cells that can clot if there's a small cut that you have, so you don't bleed to death. The platelets clump together so you form a clot and you don't bleed. So you need platelets to be functioning. And then the erythrocytes are your red blood cells. Well, you know about red blood cells. They carry oxygen. Then there's mast cells that are involved in histamine release during allergies. People that have allergies, mast cells are releasing histamine. But then down through this other little pathway, you see we have basophils and neutrophils and eosinophils and monocytes. You're saying, why are you showing me all this? I will tell you why. That certain nutrients here in terms of preventing and fighting infection are really important, particularly neutrophils that we're going to look at, and also monocytes. But notice monocytes can further morph into what are called macrophages. So that's one sort of lineage down through the neutrophils and the monocytes and the macrophages. These are really important, especially in what's called the body's innate immune system. These cells, if they see a virus, it could be, create an infection. They can knock the virus out right away. That's the innate immune system. But there's also the adaptive immune system. So if we follow the other lineage, as cells sort of morph into different kinds of cells or differentiate, as we say, there's another sort of common intermediate stem cell here, known as the lymphoid progenitor cell. And it gives rise to the lymphocytes. Well, you know about lymphocytes. Some people develop cancers called lymphomas, where the lymphocytes actually start to proliferate like crazy because of genetic changes that occur, either acquired or they were inherited. But normally the lymphocytes break off into two chains. The B lymphocytes make your antibodies. So if you get an infection, your B lymphocytes start to proliferate and make antibodies to help attack the virus or the bacteria. And you also have, and the B lymphocytes can morph into plasma cells, which can make antibodies at an even faster rate to fight an infection. And then there's the T lymphocytes. They're called T lymphocytes for a reason. The T lymphocytes, after they come out of the bone marrow and they circulate, they go first to the thymus gland, which is below the breastbone. And the thymus gland secretes hormones like thymulin that modulate the T cells, the T lymphocytes, so they develop a tremendous level of intelligence. And the T lymphocytes are like the quarterback of the whole immune system, as you're going to see. So they have to be working in a really intelligent way. Well, as you get older, your thymus gland sort of shrivels up and shrinks and undergoes involution, and there's almost nothing left. So your T cells, as you get older, become much less intelligent. They haven't gone through boot camp to learn how to use all their different fighting equipment, or to actually explain to the B cells, the B lymphocytes, how to actually produce antibodies and destroy invaders and cancer cells. So as we get older, as you know, our immune system is more compromised. You think somebody who's 19 years old, they get pneumonia, you think, oh, they're going to fight that off. Somebody 95 years old gets pneumonia, what are you thinking? Let's be honest. You think, oh, this could kill them. Why is that? The 95-year-old has the same number of immune cells as a person who's 19, but the 95-year-old, their immune cells are not as intelligent. And one of the reasons is that the thymus gland has shriveled up, and the T lymphocytes, they're called T for thymus, are not nearly as intelligent. So we'll look at now how you can modulate that through nutritional intervention to keep your T cells in the game and working at a more youthful level. There's also the natural killer cells, which are just brilliant. They can kill cancer cells, viruses, bacteria, pathogenic fungi, parasites. They're amazing cells, but they have to be primed as well. So if we look at this scheme a little bit further, I just wanted to bring your attention to, if we look at the monocytes again, they can also morph into dendritic cells, not just macrophages, but also dendritic cells. But they do this, these cells do basically the same thing, as you're going to see. And the T lymphocytes, here they are. And here are the B lymphocytes. Not only do they morph into plasma cells, which can make lots of antibodies, but they also can, when the fight is over, once you've contained a virus or a bacteria, then some of these cells morph into memory cells, and they remember what that virus looked like. So if it ever comes into your body again, you can knock it out. And that's how vaccines work. Vaccines are sort of a brilliant thing. They give your body sort of a stimulus. They put in sort of a type of agent that gets your immune cells to start making antibodies against that particular spiky protein that you would see in the coronavirus, so that if it ever shows up again, you already have memory cells that are ready to fly into action specifically to kill that virus. So to me, vaccines are brilliant, brilliant technology. But in addition to that, you need nutritional support to keep the whole thing functioning the way it was designed. So when you have a blood panel done, looking at your red blood cells and your white blood cells, what you see in the blood is that of the white blood cells, the neutrophils are the majority of them. Right. And the way you see, the neutrophils are an incredible cell. You're going to see how vitamin C modulates the neutrophil. Then you have the next common cell in your bloodstream are lymphocytes. Then you have the eosinophils. They're related more to allergy. Here are the monocytes. They're very important. And then basophils. But during an infection, you know, the cell numbers usually go much higher because you're fighting an infection. So the cells divide faster to fight the infection. So I said there's two parts to the immune system. There's the innate immune system that can kill viruses right on contact. And then there's the adaptive immune system. We'll look at that in a second. So how does the innate immune system work? As soon as a virus like the coronavirus shows up, this macrophage cell immediately knows that this doesn't belong in the body, and it basically eats it. So macro means large and phage means to eat. Macrophage is a cell that eats the virus and destroys it on contact. So your macrophages and your dendritic cells and neutrophils can do that immediately. But then there's the adaptive immune system. Not only can the macrophage eat the virus or the bacteria or the cancer cell, but the macrophage sees this virus, let's say like the COVID-19 virus, right? It has those spiky proteins on the outside. That's how the immune cells know it doesn't belong in the body. It has these weird, they're called histocompatibility factors or glycoproteins. They're just those spiky things that stick up. And so these invaders have these crazy little spiky things on the surface. So now the macrophage says, you don't belong in the body. So the macrophage, as I said, will actually eat the virus. And dendritic cells will do that too. So will neutrophils and beta lymphocytes or B lymphocytes. And then the macrophage does an unbelievable thing. And so do the dendritic cells and the neutrophils and the B lymphocytes. After they've eaten the invader, they stick the spiky proteins right on their own surface. And then they go into the lymph tissue and they go to one of the T lymphocytes, called the T helper cell. And the macrophage says, look what I found over here in the lungs. I found this spiky, crazy protein virus. Take a look. And the T helper cell, or the T lymphocyte, which is the quarterback of the whole immune system, says, oh my goodness, we can't have this. This is going to start a dangerous infection. So the T lymphocyte then talks to the B lymphocytes and says, look what the macrophage is showing me. It's showing me these crazy spiky proteins. The B lymphocyte says, aha, I'm on the case. I'm going to go and make antibodies that are going to go, and the antibodies are going to cover the virus, coat it. And that, when you coat the virus with antibodies, it becomes a target for all the immune cells to come in and kill the virus. This is the adaptive immune system. And then once the battle is over and you've killed all the viruses that could possibly infect you, then the other T lymphocytes, known as T regulatory cells or T suppressor cells, say, okay, the battle's over. We can calm down, bring the white blood cell count down. The fever can go down. All the aches and pains go down. All the inflammation goes down. And now you're healthy again. Now, sometimes things go sideways and the T suppressor cells can't tell the immune cells to calm down, and the person morphs into an autoimmune disease like rheumatoid arthritis or ankylosing spondylitis or lupus. Many autoimmune diseases occur after an infection, believe it or not, because the immune system gets out of whack and these controls are not in place. That's another story. What I want to cover tonight is what factors are dictating how intelligent your immune system is right now, considering the things that you have control over. So the aging process is a factor. You have no control over that, but I'll show you how to counter some of that age-related change. Then we have diet and alcohol. We'll look at that. Certain supplements can help. We'll spend some time there. Physical activity, how much sleep you get, stress and depression can be factors. Certain health conditions can be factors, and drugs that people take can be factors as well. So let's just touch on those. The aging process itself, once you get to be about 55 or 60 years old, the thymus gland has shriveled up and shrunk down to almost nothing. And so it's hard for the T lymphocytes to be intelligent, but you're going to see that getting the right amount of zinc into your body every day can help bring the thymus gland back to life and secrete important hormones that modulate the immune cells so the T lymphocytes can be much more intelligent. The other thing that happens is over your lifetime, free radicals can damage the immune cells and make them less intelligent. But the most important thing that happens that we have control over is that the immune cells called the neutrophils, which can kill viruses right on contact, in order for them to do that, as you're about to see, they need the right amount of vitamin C. They bring the vitamin C that you swallow from food and supplements. The neutrophils will pump it right into their own cells. And when the vitamin C gets in there, the neutrophils can use the vitamin C to generate these what are called respiratory bursts, or these peroxides that kill the virus on contact. And at the same time, because those peroxides could actually damage the neutrophil as well, the neutrophil also takes some of the vitamin C and uses it as an antioxidant to protect itself against the peroxides that it's forming, so it can keep functioning at a high level. Now, as we get older, the pump that pumps the vitamin C from the bloodstream into the neutrophil becomes much more sluggish. But as you're going to see from the published data, as you get older, if you put in higher amounts of vitamin C, we know the exact amount to put in, by the way, you can keep vitamin C getting into the neutrophil, so the neutrophil can keep making peroxides and killing viruses before they can get any major traction. And you can have enough vitamin C to protect the neutrophil so it doesn't become damaged in a way that leads to really adverse outcomes like the cytokine storm, which is one of the major causes of death, even from the coronavirus when it becomes severe. We'll come back to that part of the story. But one of the things that happens in the aging process is the neutrophils need more vitamin C to function normally. Diet and alcohol. Having high blood sugar weakens your immune system. That's just the way it is. Lots of evidence to show that. So be cognizant that you're not over-consuming more starchy foods or sweetened foods than you really need to. That inhibits the ability of the immune cells to make certain agents that would kill viruses on contact. Alcohol weakens the immune system, usually in a dose dependent. The more alcohol a person consumes, usually the weaker is the immune system. But there is an all or none effect. Even just a little bit of alcohol can weaken your immune system for a certain period of time. So during the pandemic, this is not a good time to be drinking. A lot of people are increasing their drinking to cope with the pandemic and the sadness and the loneliness and the isolation. This is the worst possible time to be drinking alcohol. That's just the reality. And because marijuana is now legal in Canada, you should know that CBD and THC both weaken the immune system. Now, some of these constituents have some medicinal value. I'm not saying they don't, but in terms of immune system function, they both weaken the immune system. So be very judicious if you're using any types of marijuana products. Physical activity, if you're doing light to moderate activity, that strengthens your immune system. But if you're overtraining right now, it weakens your immune system and will make you more prone to upper respiratory tract infections. All the evidence shows that. By the way, I'll send you these slides after the webinar tonight so you can have access to them. You can click on those links and read that research for yourself if you want to go down deeper into the weeds. Of course, smoking weakens the immune system. You know that. Not enough sleep is going to weaken your immune system. All kinds of evidence to show that. You need at least 6 hours a night, but I'll tell you, most people need 7 to 8 hours minimum to have a healthy functioning immune system and to be alert and functioning and productive individuals. People who are depressed have a weakened immune system. If you're under a lot of stress, you're not managing it well or coping, your immune system's going to be weaker. You're more prone to infection and cancer. And certain nutrients, if you're taking them at too high a dose, can weaken your immune system. Too high a dose of omega-3 fats suppress the adaptive immune system. Too high a dose of green tea catechins can weaken the immune system. If your vitamin D level is too high, you weaken your immune system. So I'm going to show you, especially with respect to vitamin D, how important that becomes. And some drugs that people, have to take, unfortunately, carry the side effect that their immune system is going to be weaker and they're more prone to infection. The same if you have some comorbidity health issues like high blood pressure, diabetes, just being over the age of 65, people who are cancer patients, people with chronic kidney disease, people with HIV infection. These higher incidence of mortality if you develop COVID-19. So what are the proactive, let's talk about the positive message now. What are the proactive strategies to maintain a strong immune system? It's simple. Get the sleep that you need, exercise, but don't overtrain. Stress management, keep your cortisol levels down. If that requires meditation or mind-body, training, biofeedback, whatever it takes, get that cortisol level down. Minimize or eliminate agents that suppress your immune system, smoking, alcohol, certain recreational drugs, and optimize your intake of nutrients that support the immune system. And that's going to be the focus of our talk right now. So what are the specific nutrients shown to modulate immune system function in a positive way? Well, you see them on the screen here. You probably are familiar with a lot of these names. I want to go through them all, and I'm going to do some really fast and some we're going to take our time. Let's start with vitamin C. It's super important. So those neutrophils that can just see a virus and eat it up and kill it on contact by generating respiratory bursts require vitamin C to generate the virus-killing respiratory bursts. This isn't my opinion. This is well documented, as you will see. The neutrophils actually pump vitamin C into the cells against a concentration gradient. That means that the neutrophils have more vitamin C inside them than there is vitamin C in the bloodstream, sort of on a per unit basis, because they're pumping the vitamin C sort of uphill into the neutrophil, because the neutrophil really relies on vitamin C concentrations. But as you get older, the pump that pumps the vitamin C into the neutrophil becomes much more sluggish. And that's one of the reasons that by age 65, especially, the neutrophils don't work very intelligently. But we see that if older people will get more vitamin C, their neutrophils start to come back to life. It can function at a much more youthful level. Vitamin C also protects the neutrophil against the peroxides or free radicals that it's generating to kill the virus, to keep the neutrophil working at a high level of intensity. And the vitamin C also helps to increase the ability of the neutrophils to go into the lungs or into the tissues to find the virus so it can knock it out. So it also helps it, like as a GPS system, get there. And vitamin C also strengthens the barrier so viruses can't get into the lungs as easily, into the intestinal tract or elsewhere in the body. And vitamin C also is required by the B lymphocytes and the T lymphocytes so they can proliferate when they need to form antibodies and do the things that they're supposed to do. And when you're fighting it, if you get an infection, your vitamin C requirement goes up even higher than you need to prevent the infection because the vitamin C turnover rate is much faster. And suboptimal vitamin C intake increases the likelihood that the neutrophils, if they're fighting an infection, will start to generate what are called nets, as I'm going to show you. The nets are called neutrophil as extravascular traps. Don't worry about that. They're just called nets. But when the nets are being secreted by the neutrophils because they don't have enough vitamin C, that's when the COVID patient or the person with severe pneumonia goes into Gnetosis and the cytokine storm starts. And it's the cytokine storm that actually causes their organs to shut down and then they die. So this was all reviewed in 2017 in a fantastic review article on vitamin C and immune system function. But here's what it looks like to map it out. Here's a large cell called the neutrophil. It eats the pathogen, which is the virus. It secretes reactive oxygen species, right? These are the free radicals and you need vitamin C to make these free radicals to kill the pathogen. And so that's what's happening here. To kill the pathogen or the virus, you need to secrete these peroxides and you need vitamin C to make those peroxides. So when things are working properly and there's enough vitamin C, then the neutrophils, once they've really been used up and they fought as many viruses as they can, then they get taken out of the circulation very safely and eaten up by a macrophage and away they go. But when vitamin C intake is suboptimal, then you start to get a swelling of the neutrophil and it promotes even more inflammation. And even worse, you go into Gnetosis where the neutrophil secretes all these nets or these neutrophil extravascular traps. And that is often what causes the cytokine storm that causes the patient to die. The patient doesn't die from the virus. They die from the cytokine storm because their immune system is going haywire. And often it's because they're not getting enough vitamin C, as I will show you. So the studies show that to optimize immune system function in a healthy young person, they require 100 to 250 milligrams a day of vitamin C, which will then get their blood level into a plasma level at or above 50 micromoles per liter. That's when your immune system is working well, when your blood level of vitamin C is above 50 micromoles per liter. But for older people, because they can't get the vitamin C into the neutrophil as easily, studies show that vitamin C requirement is now at 1,000 milligrams a day. And they also need at least 200 IUs of vitamin E to optimize immune system function. Those studies have been done. Those doses are higher. You can't get that from just eating food. That's the problem. So do most people have optimal vitamin C for immunity? They don't. In North America, low vitamin C blood levels are very common. Many people have blood vitamin C levels below 23 or 23 micromoles per liter. What I'm saying is you need to be at 50 or above. Most people are walking around at 23. Vitamin C outright deficiency is the fourth leading nutrient deficiency in the United States, where people have values at 11 micromoles per liter, not even close. They get an infection. It's going to be a serious infection. They can't fight it. The neutrophils can't work. 40% of the US population have low vitamin C levels, and 88% don't meet the RDA for vitamin E, which is only 15 IUs. As you get older, you need at least 200 international units of vitamin E. So this is one of the reasons that people are, if they get an infection as they get older, it doesn't matter what the infection is, their immune system's compromised. They need more nutritional support. The documentation is there. Very importantly, higher levels of intake above 1,000 IUs a day have been shown to prevent the decline in vitamin C depletion within white blood cells during an infection. If there is an infection, you have to go beyond 1,000 milligrams. See, that's not even enough. So has vitamin C supplementation been shown to help fight viral infections? The answer is yes. Right here in North America, studies show that elderly pneumonia patients with severe pneumonia who are given vitamin C supplementation in the hospital show faster recovery and also see normalization of their chest x-ray. The temperature comes down, other markers of infection go down like the ESR when they're just given just 1,600 milligrams a day versus the patients who don't get any vitamin C supplementation. You don't even need that much to recover from a serious infection in the lungs. Now, this isn't new. So because this data has been around for a long time, when the coronavirus first showed up in Wuhan, China, the Shanghai clinical treatment team who first treated COVID-19 in China looked at the research and said, maybe we should be trying intravenous vitamin C for people that have COVID-19 infections, especially if they're severe. And they said, they did a study and they said, you know what? The results showed that the patients who received the intravenous vitamin C therapy as part of COVID-19 treatment, this wasn't the only thing they did, but when they added the intravenous vitamin C to the standard medical cocktail, none of those patients died, and it shortened their hospital stay by 3 to 5 days compared to the people not given the vitamin C. They said, hey, this works. So in their clinical protocols that they shared with the rest of the world, they said, by the way, part of the treatment for COVID-19 infection in hospital patients should be intravenous vitamin C, and they tell them exactly how much to use, except that it's falling on deaf ears. The National Institutes of Health on February 3rd of this year, here's what they said in their statement paper. It's been shown that as little as 100 milligrams a day can maintain normal plasma levels of vitamin C in healthy young individuals. But higher doses of at least 1,000 to 3,000 milligrams a day are required for critically ill patients in ICUs. This is regarding COVID-19. Indeed, vitamin C deficiency appears to be common in COVID-19 patients. And it's also associated with the clotting, the blood clots that go on that actually cause death and stroke in some people. They're saying vitamin C even helps to prevent that from happening. The first trial to report this took place in Wuhan, China. And the initial results indicated that the administration of so much vitamin C intravenously saved lots of lives. So the National Institutes of Health in the United States are saying, yeah, we acknowledge this. The problem is it's not actually being applied. Now, on top of this, there's factors that deplete your vitamin C. Air pollution, smoking, being overweight, all these cardiovascular complications, diabetes, any autoimmune disease, any concurrent infection, if you have cancer, but just drinking caffeinated foods and beverages on a daily basis, consumption of alcohol, high levels of stress, doing aerobic exercise, even if you're just doing the right amount of aerobic exercise, your vitamin C gets depleted. So we all need extra vitamin C that we're not getting from food to get into the ideal range, no matter who we are. So my suggestion is that at least during the pandemic, you should be getting 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day minimum in 2 divided doses of 500 milligrams at one time and 500 milligrams at a later point in the day. And that's because if you take 1,000 milligrams all at once, only the first 500 milligrams can get absorbed. The second 500 milligrams won't get absorbed into the bloodstream. You can only absorb so much at one time, so you spread out 2 500 milligram doses. So the way that I do it is I take the Adeeva all-in-one multiple vitamin, because it not only has that much vitamin C, but it has a bunch of other nutrients you'll see later, that like vitamin E and zinc and vitamin D and selenium at the exact dosages that the panel's recommending. You can get that all from one product, so you're not buying a bunch of different things. So just bear with me. I also think during the pandemic, you might want to just do what I do and take an additional 500 milligrams beyond that at 2 other times during the day. So you're getting 2,000 milligrams a day on the prevention side. Maybe you don't need that much. I'm just doing that to be safe. But don't take more than 500 milligrams in a single dose, because you won't absorb anything beyond 500 milligrams. If you're starting to get an infection of any kind, it makes sense from literature that we have to increase your total intake of vitamin C over the course of the day to 4,000 or 5,000 milligrams a day until things calm down at 500 milligram doses, sort of spread out every few hours. The first doctor to really know that vitamin C had direct not only can it modulate the immune system, but has direct viral killing effects was Dr. Frederick Kenner, an MD back in the 1940s. Before there were vaccines and antibiotics weren't widespread, but antibiotics don't really kill viruses. He was able to show and publish papers the ability of high dose vitamin C and intravenous vitamin C to actually kill a lot of really important viruses. And he helped a lot of people. He had all these case reports in medical journals around polio and influenza, viral pneumonia, viral hepatitis, mumps, mononucleosis, and so on. I'm not saying this is a replacement for modern medicine. I'm just saying he was the first doctor to really realize that high dose vitamin C could be extremely helpful when the body has to fight a viral infection. What about vitamin E? Well, vitamin E works with vitamin C, helping protect the immune cells from its own free radicals, preserving their function so the immune cells can keep working at a high level. And it also stops the formation of a certain chemical called PG2 inside of immune cells that would otherwise impair their function. So it lowers the PG2 so the immune cells can keep functioning. And vitamin E really enhances the T cell immune function. Those T lymphocytes work much more intelligently in the presence of adequate vitamin E. How much vitamin E do you need? The studies show 100 to 400 IUs a day helps to reduce the incidence of upper respiratory tract infections, especially in older individuals. So you can't get that from food, I'm sorry. You need vitamin E supplementation, especially now. What about zinc? Well, zinc affects many aspects of the immune system. It helps to modulate the effects of the macrophages, the T lymphocytes, the B lymphocytes. It's in high demand, especially for those immune cells to be able to fight viruses. The thing is that zinc deficiency is extremely common, and it further weakens the thymus gland and impairs its secretion of these hormones that modulate the T lymphocytes. So zinc deficiency has been shown to actually compromise immune system function. On the other hand, zinc supplementation in humans has been shown to increase the thymulin secretion, so the thymus gland sort of comes back to life and has decreased the incidence and severity of upper respiratory tract infections, even in older subjects whose thymus gland has been totally decimated. It doesn't even exist almost, and it brings it back to life to some degree. And the T cells work more intelligently, and older people have fewer upper respiratory tract infections when they get the right amount of zinc. So how much zinc do you need? Well, we'll look at this. What's important about zinc is you can't go crazy. Sometimes less is more. Both zinc deficiency, which many people have, and too much zinc overload, they both weaken the immune system. So you have to get right into the sweet spot of zinc. Studies suggest that just getting 15 milligrams of zinc from a multiple vitamin is all you need. Human studies show that supplementation with 10 to 20 milligrams of zinc improves the immune system's ability to ward off infections. In some studies, higher doses of zinc have been used to fight an infection for short periods, like 60 to 90 milligrams, but you'd only take that for very short periods of time, because too much zinc in the long run can not only impair your immune system, but it can also raise your cholesterol level and damage in some internal organs. So if you're going to use zinc at a higher dose, only during an infection, only for 7 to 10 days, and then drop it back to 15 milligrams a day. In North America, studies show that at least 55% of all adults do not ingest the amount of zinc per day that is recommended by government agencies, right? So adult males and non-pregnant females should be consuming 15 milligrams of zinc a day. That's what we should be getting. When you get pregnant, you need slightly more, but that's beyond the scope of this discussion. Studies show that adult males and females are getting, on average, 11 milligrams a day. Elderly people are getting 8 milligrams a day. So most people have accumulated a marginal zinc deficiency up to this point in their life. So just getting 15 milligrams of zinc from a high potency multivitamin guards against zinc deficiency, gives you a little extra zinc in case an infection starts, you have some reserves, and you're in good shape. In North America and in many developed countries, 30% of elderly individuals have been shown to have mild to moderate zinc deficiency. And other groups also tend to be in that category of higher risk, like Black Americans, Mexican Americans, premenopausal women of childbearing age, and especially young women 12 to 19 years of age. But the typical chronic suboptimal intake of zinc across the population often leads to signs and symptoms of mild to moderate zinc deficiency, which sort of starts to show up over time as people get older. That day to day, week after week, month after month, year after year, not getting quite enough zinc that you need. Here's how it manifests itself. Your immune system is weaker. You're more prone to infection, and you can't fight an infection if you get it. You can't taste your food nearly as well. If the lights go out, your eyes don't adjust to the darkness the way they used to. Your muscle mass starts to break down and you get weaker. Wound healing is compromised. You get a cut or a wound on your skin that's an open wound. It stays there a long time. You bang your leg on a piece of furniture. The bruise stays there for 3 to 6 months. Think about this. What do older people complain of? My immune system's not so strong. I can't taste my food that well anymore. I don't see that well in the dark. My muscle mass is disappearing. If I get a bruise, it stays there for 6 months. It doesn't just disappear after a week. This is zinc deficiency. This is a marginal zinc deficiency that has accumulated over time that's increasing the likelihood that if this person catches a virus that's fairly virulent, it's going to take them out because their immune system is compromised on top of all these other side effects. And what happens? I had the infection. I can't taste my food anymore. No wonder. You already were zinc deficient. Now you used up the remaining zinc you have to fight off an infection. And now the long-term symptoms of something like COVID-19 is, I lost my sense of taste. No kidding. Here's some additional zinc references you might want to look up. So what did the National Institute of Health say on February 3rd about zinc and COVID-19? Not like zinc and infections, zinc and COVID-19. Here's what the government said. An observational study showed that COVID-19 patients had significantly lower zinc levels in comparison to healthy controls. No kidding. And that zinc deficiency in COVID-19 patients, those with a blood level of zinc below 80 micrograms per deciliter, tended to have more complications and potentially prolonged hospital stays. Exactly what I'm saying. You're in a state of marginal zinc deficiency. When you get sick, you're going to get really sick. In the coronavirus specifically, they went on to say that if you give people zinc, it can interrupt the replication of the virus. What's the problem now? We're afraid we're going to get the virus and it's going to replicate and mutate in our bodies and become even more severe. Zinc helps to block the virus replication so it can't mutate so easily. There are no drugs that are doing that yet. What about selenium? Well, like zinc, selenium also helps support the immune system in a whole bunch of ways. Animal studies show that low selenium status increases risk of viral and other infections, and selenium repletion, putting selenium back, reverses the risk and the immune system comes back to life. Now, like vitamin D, selenium supplementation is shown to slow the progression of HIV disease in humans. So someone who has an HIV infection, if you give them vitamin D and selenium, it slows down the progression of their disease because that's also a virus, isn't it? The HIV infection is a virus, just like coronavirus. More optimal selenium status is shown to decrease virus mutation. Where do you think that the Delta strain came from? It came from the virus getting into someone's body, mutating, and then they're infecting the next person with a mutated strain. You want to stop not only the virus from replicating, but from mutating in your body and the body of everybody else if they would just get on board with it. Selenium has been shown to inhibit the life-threatening cytokine storm in experimental studies. And selenium may also prevent abnormal clots seen in COVID-19 patients. That's right from the Frontiers of Nutrition in September of 2020. Selenium supplementation has been shown to enhance the efficacy of the polio virus. You get a polio virus to decrease the risk of polio. If you take selenium supplements at the same time, the polio vaccine works better. Selenium has shown impressive array of anti-cancer properties in human epidemiological studies and animal studies. That should say animal experiments. Selenium status in COVID-19. Well, here's something to know. That in China, Germany, and Sweden, they all came to the same conclusion. They said, you know what? In patients who have low selenium status, if they get COVID-19, the mortality rates are much higher. And that's what this whole slide is showing. COVID-19 patients in China, Germany, and Sweden, where the pandemic hit early stages, when their selenium status was low, these people died at 3 times the rate than people that had better selenium status. And they say, in Sweden, 71% of elderly are selenium deficient when they're admitted to the intensive care. And we know that studies have shown that selenium supplementation has significantly reduced infections in institutionalized elderly people. Who was dying initially? It's institutionally elderly people who were institutionalized. Why? Because their nutritional status is pathetic. The food is awful. They don't get enough vitamin D. They're not getting fortified nutrients. They're already older, so they're already compromised. They need even more nutritional support. And the numbers are just horrific and terrible in this situation. So the recommended daily allowance for selenium, the amount you're supposed to get according to the government, is about 55 micrograms a day. Most people get that. But studies show the recommendation in Sweden is for citizens to supplement with an additional 200 micrograms a day of selenium to help optimize immune system function and decrease viral replication and mutation. So some countries are waking up to this. In addition, 200 micrograms of selenium daily have been given in the elderly for years with significant positive results, lowering viral infection rates and cardiovascular mortality. The most recent study was just in 2020, showing that the group given selenium supplementation with coenzyme Q10, more than a 40% reduction even in congestive heart failure and cardiovascular death, not just infections. So selenium also very important. In my opinion, 200 international units a day to 400 international units a day. But really 200 is really the sweet spot. All those studies in Sweden really tipped us off to the amount of selenium most adults would benefit from. Then there's vitamin D and immunity, and most people know about vitamin D being important for the immune system. So on this slide, I've sort of condensed the research down to what are the highlights, and I'll show you a bit of the research. But what we see is that you want to have a vitamin D blood level that's above 75 or 80 nanomoles per liter, right? Once you do that, your innate immune system works much more intelligently. That means the macrophages, they can kill viruses right on contact. At the same time, if your vitamin D goes above 140 nanomoles per liter, it actually is pulling the adaptive immune system back. You can't make antibodies that well. You become more prone to infection if your vitamin D goes too high. So you want a vitamin D blood level that's between 80 and 140 nanomoles per liter. Now, in the United States, they use different units. They use nanograms per milliliter. So you'd want to be between 32 and 56 nanograms per milliliter. You need sufficient vitamin D for the innate immune system work, but if your blood levels go too high, you're actually inhibiting the function of your antibodies from your plasma cells and your B lymphocytes. That doesn't work very well. Most people can get an ideal blood level of vitamin D by supplementing with 1,000 international units a day. Some people might need 2,000 international units a day. If your vitamin D goes too high, above 250 nanomoles per liter or 100 nanograms per milliliter, you'll go into vitamin D toxicity. These people who are walking around taking 10,000, 20,000 IUs of vitamin D a day to protect against the coronavirus, they're crazy. This is dangerous to do because a high dose like that is going to actually weaken your immune system and give you vitamin D toxicity potentially. You don't need to go that high. Once inside your immune cells, vitamin D, as it gets into it goes right to the genes of the cell and tells the genes to make specific types of chemicals that allow the immune system to be much more intelligent. All kinds of evidence on this. So we look at vitamin D and COVID-19 studies. Worldwide studies show that low levels of vitamin D increase the risk of COVID-19, and you also have more serious complications and mortality if your vitamin D level is too low. Who's at high risk? Older people, especially over the age of 80, they have really low vitamin D. Why? Because they make less vitamin D in their skin, even if they're exposed to sunlight, and their kidneys don't make the more active form of vitamin D as they get older. Now, you can't make vitamin D through a window pane. You think about an older person in a senior's home or a nursing home, and they sit by the window and the sunlight comes in. You can't make vitamin D through a window pane. But you can get cancer that way because those particular wavelengths that cause skin damage can still get through the window. So if you're going to sit by a window pane all day, put on some sunscreen. When you're at higher latitudes, as you move further from the sun, I live in Toronto at the 42nd or 40th degree latitude, it's way up north. Between October and May, even on a sunny day, you're not making any vitamin D. That wavelength to make vitamin D doesn't get to the Earth's surface when you're above the 40th degree latitude between October and May. You need supplements. People who have darker skin, they make more melanin in their skin. Melatonin is blocking the ultraviolet light from getting into the skin to make vitamin D. So often, a person whose skin is darker is much prone to lower vitamin D levels. And as you see on television, the coronavirus is wiping them out. And one of the reasons is that their vitamin D level is too low, in my opinion. Overweight individuals, type 2 diabetics, they turn vitamin D over fast, so they often have lower vitamin D blood levels. And fat cells make inflammatory chemicals that further lower vitamin D. People with autoimmune conditions also tend to have lower levels of vitamin D. So in this study in the Irish Medical Journal in April of 2020, shortly after the pandemic started, they state that the authors proposed that whereas optimizing vitamin D levels will certainly benefit bone and muscle health, the data suggests that it's also likely to reduce serious COVID-19 complications. We already saw that over a year ago. This may be because vitamin D is important in regulation and suppression of the inflammatory cytokine response, which causes the severe consequences of COVID-19 and acute respiratory distress syndrome associated with ventilation and death. Vitamin D helps to prevent these major complications. So the Seneca study that was published, where they looked at older people living in Spain and Switzerland and Italy, they said, hey, these older people have vitamin D levels at below 26 nanomoles per liter. What did I tell you? You need to be at 75 to 80 nanomoles per liter. These people, older people in these countries are at 26. The average blood vitamin D level in older people in Spain was 26. In Italy, it was 28. Whereas in Nordic countries like Finland, the levels were higher. Why? Because in Finland, they know they're so far from the sun, they don't make enough vitamin D. So they eat fish that has vitamin D, they take cod liver oil, and they fortify their dairy products. Their vitamin D levels are high because they know if they don't get enough vitamin D, they're all going to have osteoporosis. So they're careful with it. But in these other countries, Spain and Switzerland and Italy, where COVID-19 was just knocking out these older people, their vitamin D level was extremely low, putting them at very high risk. They can't fight an infection when your vitamin D level is that low. So poor vitamin D status is especially poor in institutionalized people in nursing homes. What a surprise. 75% of them being severely vitamin D deficient with blood vitamin D levels below 25. This is like a tragedy. This should never have happened. Who's in charge of these homes that are allowing vitamin D levels to be this low? They state that people in Southern European countries, you think people in Southern European countries would have more vitamin D because it's sunnier, but they tend to stay in the shade. It's not cool to have a tan when you're in Italy and Spain and France. So they tend to stay out of the sun. Whereas people in northern parts of Europe, they know that they're not getting enough sunlight. They're going to have osteoporosis from vitamin D deficiency. So they find ways to supplement with cod liver oil. They fortify their dairy products. They eat more fish to get more vitamin D. So their levels are a little higher and their death rates were lower during the pandemic. What did the National Institute of Health say about vitamin D and COVID-19 this year? They said, each degree latitude north of 28 degrees corresponds to a 4.4% increase in COVID-19 mortality. I'm living at 40 or 42 degree latitude. So, that gives me like a 44 or 45% increased risk of dying from COVID-19 just because I'm living so far from the equator. But if your vitamin D levels are at or above 75 nanomoles per liter, you're okay, even if you live that far from the equator, because you're not making vitamin D from the sun. But if you take supplements, it's shown to protect you. Even the National Institute of Health is saying that. Same thing in India. We saw lower vitamin D, higher risk of death, slightly higher vitamin D, slightly severe complications. In England, they're saying we've got a major problem here in England, especially with our and in Scotland, we have with our people who are Black and Asian and minor ethnic communities, vitamin D levels are really low. It's really a disaster. So in England, what they decided to do is they said to all people who are they're offering free vitamin D supplements that they'll send you through the mail to 2.5 million people living in care homes in England. They say, we'll send you enough vitamin D, at least for the winter, not just to prevent osteoporosis, but the research is showing it may also help to reduce risk of COVID-19. We're going to send you vitamin D for free. They should be doing that here. Higher vitamin D status is estimated also to decrease cancer rates by 13% across the population in Germany. So in 2021, a report came out from all these German scientists saying, you know, if we gave all of the citizens in Germany 1,000 IUs of vitamin D free, it would reduce cancer deaths by 13%, because vitamin D also optimizes immune system function, has other anti-cancer properties. And in the long run, it would save us money. The cost of managing cancer would be much lower. That's where we're spending a lot of money. We could prevent it in the first place by giving people 1,000 IUs of vitamin D. But we should all be doing 1,000 IUs of vitamin D. So in Spain, the Spanish Society of Geriatrics, now that they've had a lot of experience with COVID-19, are saying, here's what we do. A person presents in the hospital with COVID-19 infection. We look at their blood vitamin D level, and based on their vitamin D level, we give them the amount of vitamin D they're going to need orally in order to get their vitamin D status up so they don't have serious complications. So the lower your vitamin D, the more vitamin D they give you as soon as you have a COVID-19 virus and you're admitted to the hospital. They're not doing that here. I don't know why. What about probiotics and immunity? Probiotics are live bacteria and virus strains and types of fungi or yeast that actually are healthy to have in the gut, part of the gut microflora, and they've been shown to enhance the ability of immune cells to eat an invader. That's called phagocytosis, to actually eat a virus, eat a bacteria, eat a cancer cell, and help the body produce specific antibodies to fight it and to enhance the gut barrier so things can't get into the bloodstream so easily that can hurt us. So probiotics have shown tremendous effects on modulating the immunity. Probably a lot of you are taking a probiotic supplement, which I think is a great idea. So a review article in the journal Current Opinion in Gastroenterology in 2011 showed that probiotics showed therapeutic potential for diseases, including immune response to disease, allergy, eczema, viral infection, and also making vaccines work more effectively. So if you get a vaccination of any kind, taking probiotics makes the vaccine more effective. Researchers cite studies showing that probiotics regulate our innate and our adaptive immune response by modulating the functions of dendritic cells, macrophages, T cells, and B lymphocytes, all the cells we've been talking about. With respect to probiotics in upper respiratory tract infections, the Cochrane review of 12 trials involving almost 4,000 patients in 8 different countries was analyzed. Here's what it showed. Probiotics were found to be more effective than the placebo. So they were, reducing the number of participants who experienced episodes of acute upper respiratory tract infections by 47%, and the duration by a couple of days if they got sick. And they used fewer antibiotics through the course of the year. Older people, when they take probiotics, they don't necessarily have fewer upper respiratory tract infections, but the disease is less severe and the disease is, the duration is shorter. In younger people, it reduces their upper respiratory tract infections, like school-age children. They have fewer upper respiratory tract infections and very few adverse side effects. The question is, what is the right combination of probiotics? So it's all over the map. No one really knows what is the perfect probiotic supplement. But if the probiotic supplement you're taking has sort of a combination of the lactobacillus strains and the bifidus strains and the streptococcus thermophilus, which is a virus, and this yeast species, Saccharomyces species, this combination of these types of probiotics in one combination where you're getting like 2 to 10 billion per capsule, you've got yourself a good probiotic. So most drugstores and health food stores have something like that you can find. A couple of other things I want to mention. Some other superstars in the game of immunity include medicinal mushrooms, astragalus, milk thistle, and the indole 3-carbinol. Let's just touch on them quickly. Medicinal mushrooms like shiitake mushrooms, maitake, cordyceps, turkey tail, versicolor. These medicinal mushrooms, I really like reishi in particular, by the way, contain beta-D-glucans and some other components that fit right into the immune cells and help the immune cells generate a more intelligent response. So one of the researchers says, medicinal mushrooms have been shown to have the ability to stimulate the immune system, modulate humoral and cellular immunity, and potentiate anti-mutagenic, anti-tumorigenic activity, as well as rejuvenating the immune system weakened by radiotherapy or radiation therapy and chemotherapy in cancer patients, meaning that cancer patients who are undergoing radiation therapy or chemotherapy and their immune system is getting knocked out, these mushrooms bring the immune system back to life. So people have compromised immunity. These medicinal mushrooms are really helpful. Here's sort of how they work. Cells like macrophages, you now know a lot about the macrophage, have receptors for the beta glucans found in the mushrooms. And they eat the beta glucans when you swallow the mushrooms. And then they go into the lymph tissue and the bloodstream, and they secrete little fragments of the beta glucans that stimulate other immune systems to become more intelligent so they can fight infections and tumor cells. It's just unbelievable. Our bodies were designed to get medicinal mushrooms inside. So here's the beta glucan stimulating the receptor on the immune cell. It gets activated, and now it can destroy pathogens and viruses and bacteria with much more efficacy. So these 3 research papers, if you really want to dig down deep, really explain it in some detail. Then there's astragalus, another really amazing herb. Even at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, they're saying, hey, astragalus boosts the immune system competency and exerts direct antiviral effects. It's been, the 2012 review says it boosts the release of interferon and interleukin-2 from key immune cells, which are well-established strong boosters of the immune system. During the pandemic, I think you should be taking a combination of reishi mushroom extract with astragalus. I'll show you how to do it very simply. With milk thistle. Milk thistle, we know, helps to support the liver, but it also helps to improve proliferation of lymphocytes and get the immune cells to make certain chemicals that are very important to fight viruses. The immune modulatory effect may be a benefit, increasing the immunity to infectious diseases. That's really critically important right now. That's from the American Surgery Journal in 2002. And then the indole 3-carbinol that you get from cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, bok choy, also stimulate a key receptor called the aryl hydrocarbon, which helps the adaptive immune system work more intelligently to fight infections. So you're getting the idea. This is how it works. The indole 3-carbinol gets into the immune cell, it upregulates the function of the aryl receptor, and you have better immune modulation. You can fight viruses and cancer cells more effectively. So I formulated for Adeeva a number of years ago, Adëeva Nutritionals. I formulated this product that has the whole combination in it. The reishi mushroom extract, the astragalus, the milk thistle, and the indole 3-carbinol. I used to say, you don't really need it till you're 50 years old, in which case, when your immune system is starting to decline, take 2 capsules a day, as I do, to help reduce risk of infection and other problems. But I think that during the pandemic, every adult should be taking 2 of these capsules a day. At the first sign of an infection, I would be taking 4 capsules twice a day personally. So here's how your immune system works. Here's a cancer cell under a microscope. These are some of your T lymphocytes and T killer cells finding the cancer cell. Then they secrete chemicals and they blow the cancer cell up within 5 to 15 minutes. But you need nutritional support for the immune cells to work that way. Here's a big cancer cell here. These are macrophages coming to the site to ingest and kill the cancer cell. The macrophages need vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc, selenium, reishi mushrooms. All these things modulate immune system function so you can actually prevent disease to the best of your ability. And then there's melatonin. So, melatonin helps you get to sleep at night, but as you get older, your melatonin levels drop down. Well, the quarterback of the immune system, your T helper cell, the T lymphocyte, the CD4 cell, relies on melatonin in order for it to function normally. So as you get older, as your melatonin levels start to drop significantly, look, as you get to be middle age and be like how low your melatonin is, that melatonin can no longer dock to the T helper cell, to the T lymphocyte. And it's the T lymphocyte that tells all the other immune cells how to go out and fight infections, including the beta lymphocytes to make antibodies. All of this shuts down. So not only is the thymus gland shrinking, but you have less melatonin to stimulate your T lymphocytes. So of course your immune system is going to be weaker. So putting melatonin back into your body can be helpful. All kinds of recent studies showing that melatonin modulates the immune system, especially the T lymphocytes, and makes the immune system work much more intelligently, and also has direct anti-cancer properties, especially for breast and we think prostate cancer. So what did the National Institute of Health say about melatonin and COVID-19? They said, well, melatonin is another supplement that has been identified as a potential antiviral agent against COVID-19. It's been highlighted as a potential therapeutic agent also to treat COVID-19 due to its documented antioxidant, anti-apoptotic, immune modulator, and anti-inflammatory effects. Here's something to know. When Donald Trump was admitted to George Washington Hospital for COVID-19, this is what they gave him. In addition to all the drugs, they gave him melatonin, vitamin D, and zinc as part of the treatment. But those things are also important for prevention. In people who exercise a lot, they deplete their L-glutamine, and L-glutamine is one of the primary fuels for your immune cells. So if you're exercising a lot, the studies show that if you take some L-glutamine, which is just a powder, I'll show you this at the end, it can actually keep your immune system stronger and decrease your risk of infection. So if you're someone who exercises on a regular basis, you might want to get 2 teaspoons a day of L-glutamine put into a shake or into a juice or into, to some kind of juice especially, and just drink it down. I'll show you how to do that. Here are the glutamine studies with respect to upper respiratory tract infections. And then this recent integrative medicine approach by the Frontline COVID-19 Clinical Care Alliance. They were the medical doctors that first developed the intravenous treatment for sepsis. These are pretty smart guys. And they said, COVID-19, we think that a lot of the same nutrients would help in COVID-19 patients. So they first recommended, in addition to like prednisone, vitamin C and vitamin B1 and heparin and zinc and vitamin D and melatonin and magnesium. But then they modified it recently, including ivermectin. So I know there's some controversy about ivermectin, but when they first used this cocktail of all these nutrients and drugs together, they saw a dramatic result in deaths in their first published study when they looked at 2 centers compared to the average death rate of patients hospitalized for COVID-19. I just thought I'd mention that. And so quercetin, which is part of what they used, has been shown to help inhibit viral replication to prevent infections. But with you're going to take quercetin as a supplement, you have to know that quercetin gets metabolized to an inactive component. You need vitamin C to stabilize the quercetin. That's what I'm saying. So if you're going to take quercetin, let's say for every 250 milligrams of quercetin, you want to consider making sure you're getting 500 milligrams of vitamin C at the same time. And you don't need to take more than 1,000 milligrams of quercetin per day. That should be the maximum you would even consider. So here's a summary of what I'm saying. Practical strategies for immune support. Mild to moderate exercise, but don't overtrain, right? Don't smoke, avoid or limit your alcohol consumption, and avoid recreational drugs that can weaken the immune system, including THC and CBD. If you're going to use those, make sure it's very judicious. Get the sufficient sleep that you need, manage your stress, all kinds of ways to do that. Don't ingest super high doses of omega-3 fats. And this is a supplement that I formulated and I take every day because it covers a lot of territory. So this is the Adëeva all-in-one multiple vitamin and mineral. It has 1,000 milligrams of C, 400 IUs of vitamin E, the 200 micrograms of selenium, 15 milligrams of zinc, 1,000 IUs of vitamin D, bioflavonoids, and everything from vitamin A right through to zinc. Everything that you really need all in one bottle pretty much. So you take 2 caplets twice a day. That's the full adult dose. That's what I've been doing for many years. So you don't have to buy C and E and selenium and D. And then, start buying 5 different bottles just to get something you can get all in one bottle for like $1.50 a day. You've got all those major nutrients covered. So this is what that multiple vitamin looks like when you break it down. There's the 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, 1,000 IUs of vitamin D, the 400 IUs of vitamin E, a B50 complex. A lot of people take that. The first 500 milligrams of calcium to support your bones. Now here's the 15 milligrams of zinc, the 200 micrograms of selenium. Remember how important that was? And everything all the way down to lutein for your eyes to decrease risk of macular degeneration, and also lycopene for the prostate gland and the cervix of the uterus. Just think about taking 2 of those capsules twice a day. It's good advice in my view for most people. Then there's the Adëeva Immuno Detox Prime product that has the reishi mushroom, the astragalus, milk thistle, and the indole 3-carbinol. I do what I do. I take 2 capsules per day. It's not that big a deal. The bottle will last a long time. But I would also take some additional vitamin C, as I told you about. And during the pandemic, 500 milligrams, another 2 times a day, I would consider that. If you're going to take quercetin, make sure you're taking it with vitamin C. Make sure your vitamin D blood level is in the ideal range. People say, how much vitamin D do I really take? Well, start with 1,000 IUs of vitamin D, but go to your doctor and get your vitamin D tested. Make sure you're between 80 and 140 nanomoles per liter, or between 32 to 56 nanograms per milliliter if you're in the United States. And then I get the medicinal mushroom blend from mushroomharvest.com. They're in Washington State, and they'll ship it across the border to Canada. I have like 1 or 2 teaspoons a day mixed into some juice just to get a full mushroom blend. I think during the pandemic, it's a good idea. Adeeva also makes sleepy naturals that'll help to give you a really good night's sleep. It contains the melatonin most adults need, but with some other factors that help to induce a better quality sleep. Because you want not just sleep quantity, you want sleep quality. You want to get into the deep levels of sleep that are very renewing. Take a good probiotic supplement. If you're exercising regularly, buy some L-glutamine powder at a local drugstore or health food store, and take a couple of teaspoons a day, or 5 to 10,000 milligrams. That would be 5 to 10 grams, and just stir it into the juice mix. So in terms of supplement strategy summary, the Adeeva all-in-one multiple vitamin and mineral is what I take, along with Adeeva with Immuno Detox Prime, right? Adeeva Sleepy Naturals for the melatonin, and some additional C, some additional D if necessary. Get a probiotic. Think about a medicinal mushroom blend to add, and if you're exercising, L-glutamine powder. That is my best advice. So if you want to see those supplements in real time, you can go to Adeeva.com, but feel free, if you have any questions, to email me at drjames@adeeva.com. I'll be happy to answer them. We'll send you a copy of these slides after the webinar so you can spend some more time if you like going through them. I know I had to move pretty quickly to get this done. I've already gone over time. I apologize. But all the links to the research is there. And I think the more you read on this, the more you realize that what I'm showing you tonight is extremely useful and valid. So I see a couple of questions, I think, in the chat box. Let me go up and take a look. My doctor told me 3,000 IUs of vitamin D daily. Should I reduce it? It depends on what your blood level of vitamin D is. So sometimes you have to pay for a vitamin D blood test. It's only about $25. Look and see what your blood vitamin D level is. And if it's below 80 nanomoles per liter, then you should stay on 3,000 IUs until you get into the ideal range. If you're already in the ideal range, like for instance, my vitamin D level is at 110 nanomoles per liter. That's exactly where I want it. It's above 80 and below 140. I take 1,000, sometimes 2,000 IUs a day. I get 1,000 in the multivitamin, and then sometimes I take an extra 1,000 IUs a day, especially when it's not summertime anymore. And I'm at 110. I don't need 3,000 IUs a day. So it depends on your blood level. That's the answer. Eosinophils and asthma. Is this an autoimmune form of asthma? Usually high eosinophils are related to sort of more to parasitic infections. Usually in asthma, it's the mast cells that are secreting a lot of histamine. And it's upregulating also spasm and secretions in the bronchial tree, which is a totally separate discussion than what we're talking about tonight. So the nutritional management of asthma is a totally different kind of discussion. Very little of what I had to say tonight applies to it, other than getting your vitamin D level into the ideal range. That has been shown to be helpful for asthmatics in recent studies. Well, okay, everybody, that seems to be it. So I want to, unfortunately, I can't see your faces, and, thank you all personally, and hope you were paying attention. But I do hope this was meaningful and helpful. I thank you very much for sitting in. And we'll have other webinars and other key topics coming up in future months. So keep an eye out for that. And once again, thank you for attending. And I hope to see you real soon. Have a lovely evening. Thank you and good night.